Hey, greetings, everybody. Sluggo's back with my new hat. So, just putting some stuff here in the chat. And here we go. Welcome back, folks. I hope all of you have had a good couple days. I don't know how it shows up. Hey, Tommy, welcome back, brother. How you doing? Excuse me while I take a swig here. And chew on another ice cube. REC Auto Sports, welcome. Yeah, Tommy, I saw that at Lemoore. F-35 went down. I'm purposely waiting, Tommy, to talk about that. Evening, Jason. Welcome. And the reason being is there's going to be like an initial type of report on what happened. All I know is it was in the pattern. Something happened. Pilot did get out. He's safe, or she's safe. And I don't know if it'll be an NTSB hearing much more than it will be a military kind of thing saying, hey, malfunctioning jet, something happened. Pilot had to get out. And it landed in a field somewhere next to Lemoore within just less than a couple miles of it, is what I know, Tommy. So I haven't seen a crash report on the one in Alaska yet. And here's another one that has gone down. So we've got an Air Force F-35 that's gone down now, and Navy that's gone down. So, we'll see. And like I said, I'm going to wait about 48 hours before I talk about the F-35 crash at Lemoore today. What I want to talk about tonight is what's this hearing on Washington and helicopter with the plane? Yeah. Tommy, interesting. You should bring that one up because I'm going to have my good buddy Joe Katazinski, Taz, on again. He's got some really good insight into the crash in DC because he flies in there all the time. He flies into Reagan National into Dulles quite a bit, and he told me there's some weird things going on in the helicopter cockpit, and the way that the United flight was turning on the visual to final, they never saw the helo because they were belly up to the helo. Does that make sense? They were turning onto final for the runway and were belly up to it. And the first officer may have seen the lights of the helo, but probably very, very late. Gerald, welcome. You're first time I've seen your name. Yeah, that's Lieutenant Colonel. Or just Sluggo, okay? I go by my call sign too. So turning on to final, and he was at Oshkosh, and we talked about this, and he wants to come back on and talk about the airspace problems that we're having, not just with the airspace and it's being so congested, but how old the infrastructure is. Because you got to remember, this was put in back in the 50s and 60s. So some of this stuff is, thanks, Gerald, for that. Some of this infrastructure is as old as the KC-135, which is a problem. And now you have to look at what can artificial intelligence do to help make the airspace structure in the United States and globally more safe and secure. More safe to keep things like this from happening, more secure uh, to keep nefarious characters and things happening to airplanes. All right. So we're going to have him on again. There's 4 things I want to talk about tonight. One of them, I'll be honest with you, upsets me. Okay. And that is they're not going to have another tanker competition. And I want all of you to understand, having gone through the Operational Test and Evaluation Center and working there, learning about the procurement process, I will admit to you all that that process is broke. It's broken. You know, we're buying $250 hammers, you know, $10,000 toilet seats. But the reason, in my opinion, it's broken is because what's happening with the KC-46. Says we're not going to have any more competition. We're going to get the 179 KC-46s, but we're going to continue to buy KC-46s. And I really, really want to know what went into that decision. Because past performance is a huge criteria for looking at procuring aircraft. And right now, the T-7 is delayed, the new advanced trainer. The KC-46 still has a number of problems, and a couple of them deal with the refueling system. We've had an airplane scrape and 2 booms broke off of KC-46s. One just again a couple weeks ago. The remote vision system is still problematic because of sun angle, sun glint. Okay. Excuse me again. The boom is stiff. There's still some bugs in the refueling system of the KC-46, you know, and that's its primary mission. And they had a KC-46 at Oshkosh from the New Hampshire Air National Guard. Crews love it, love the airplane, flying it, okay? But they also realize there's still some problems with the airplane. But I want you to look at what's happening here in the procurement system. If criteria is a large part of choosing the right equipment for the military, if past performance is part of that, then we've done the military folks a disservice. Because right now, one company has a lot to answer for. And what I hope happens is somebody up on the Hill, Capitol Hill, whether it be in the House or the Senate, House Armed Services Committee or Senate Armed Services Committee, somebody says, wait a minute. We have a problematic tanker that is coming to us late. It's coming to us with problems in the initial system, in the main systems that it's supposed to perform. Oh, and it still can't carry cargo. All right. There's still some problems with the cargo floor. And yeah, Tommy, call your senators. I would love to have Josh Hawley of Missouri latch onto this, or Senator Ted Cruz, because clearly right now the Airbus A330 multi-role tanker transport is doing well, doing very well. I think the last 6 international competitions for a multi-role tanker transport aircraft have all been won by the A330 Airbus. Now, some of you may be saying, well, wait a minute, Sluggo, it's not US built. That is not correct. It was going to be US built. It was going to have General Electric engines on it, not Rolls-Royce. And they were going to make, and may have made, a very large facility in Lake Charles, Louisiana, that was going to assemble them. You know, put the fuselage barrels together, you know, build the airplane over here in the United States. And as a matter of fact, I can't remember where I saw this. They went and painted one of the A330 MRTT tankers in Air Force markings. U.S. Air Force on the side, stars and bars, everything. Just to kind of show we've got airplanes right now ready to go. And I think that airplane was marked up that way. I think it was during the recompete, the time period where Boeing protested and the recompete was going on. But I'll have to go back and look, okay? Or call my good friend Charlie Coolidge and ask him. He was the senior or executive vice president for EADS that was running this show. And that tanker, like I said, is doing very well. Have I told all of you? Maybe I have. I flew the A330 tanker simulator that was down in Melbourne, Florida, with Northrop Grumman's senior vice president, executive vice president, retired Lieutenant General Bill Welser, who I worked for twice and is a good friend. Recently, matter of fact, stayed with he and his lovely wife, Sue, during the AMC Museum open cockpit day at Dover Air Force Base. Man, that was a lot of fun. Those of you that are in striking distance of Dover Air Force Base, every third Saturday, I'm putting in a plug for the AMC Air Mobility Command Museum here. Go. Those of you that live Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Virginia, whatever, go to the open cockpit day at the AMC Museum at Dover Air Force Base. It is absolutely fabulous. And it's not just 1 or 2 cockpits, folks. I mean, almost every airplane that was outside, you could go into. KC-10, C-5, KC-97, all the cockpits were open. I didn't get into the KC. I really wanted to get in the KC-97. And while I was at Oshkosh, I met a KC-97 flight engineer. It was fascinating talking to him. You know, 4 turning, 2 burning, the jets and everything. Yeah, Jason, I think they went ahead and made the Lake Charles facility. I think you're right. Tommy, I've not been to the Boneyard yet. Flown over it, but I've not walked around it. I was down there during COVID and it was closed. They wouldn't let you on. You had to have called like a month in advance. They had to like do a background check on you. There was all kinds of crazy things that they had to do for you to get in the Boneyard. Anyway, back to the A330 tanker. So Bill Welser took me into the simulator that they had, and we took off out of Nellis, because I'm familiar with Nellis, having been at the weapons school and flying in and out of there. Okay. I will tell you, I was apprehensive about the side stick. I'd flown KC 135s my entire career, and I thought, what's this going to be like? No center yoke. Took me about 2 minutes to get used to it. Flying a instrument approach to the Nellis runways, an ILS from about 8 miles out. And I was just toying with it. I just wanted to see what it felt like, okay, obviously. And I'll tell you, it felt very comfortable. And all of my Airbus pilot buddies who flew Boeing in a yoke tell me that they got used to it really quickly. And it seems so natural to sit there, with, hand on the stick here, hand on throttle here, and fly. It's all fly by wire. And I did a couple of instrument approaches, did a couple of overheads, then just went out to the range. Again, this is in the sim, out to the range and just flew a tanker mission with it, with airplanes like I think they're F-15E Strike Eagles. And in the simulator, you've got, the basic, 270-degree look, okay, from back here all the way around. Very comfortable airplane to fly. Very, with the GE engines, very power responsive. Some of the A330s have the Rolls-Royce engines. Some of them have the GE engines. Ours would have had the GE engines because, again, that was one of the big complaints about buying an Airbus tanker was, well, it's not made in the United States. No, actually it is. The Lake Charles facility was where they're going to do this at. They're going to have General Electric engines on it. I mean, it would have been a nice tanker. Yes, they've had a boom failure on the A330 tanker a number of years ago. They had one during testing fall off while it was refueling an F-16 over Spain, I think it was. But they seem to have all that worked out. And now there is, what do they call themselves? There's like a consortium of nations, NATO nations, that have created an air refueling unit that are flying the A330 tankers. And I met one of those guys at the Air Refueling Systems Advisory Group earlier in the year. And Mike Jam, welcome. Welcome back. And he was very, shall we say, vociferous about how the A330 is handling itself and how they love it. Okay. John Castillo, welcome. John Castillo, let me see. You got a couple things here. I'm a pilot for Southwest. Excellent. Great airline. Curious on what your thoughts about the interview with Captain Steve on Piercemore, where the panel suggested that the fuel control switches could have failed. John, I'll tell you something. They said that those control switches they thought were turned off. But as you know, John, you have to pull those things out and down. You don't just push them down, you pull them out and down. And I don't know how you start the engines, John, in a Southwest 737. There was some people that were saying the first officer turned the jet off, turned those things off. And I went, I don't think so. That's just me, okay? Because obviously if I remember right, John, and help me out here, John. The first officer was flying the 787. The captain was basically watching what was happening. The first officer was pilot in command, and I think the captain would have stopped anyone. I don't care who's sitting in the right seat from fussing with those switches, because you and I both know, John, if you had those switches in your cockpit and you saw somebody's hand on takeoff going toward those, you would have slapped the hand and taken control of the aircraft, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? You would have slapped that person's hand and you would have said, I have the aircraft. But for both of them to fail within nanoseconds of each other, John, I really want to see that report, because Mitch, thank you for that. Switches didn't both fail 1 second apart from each other. Yeah, but still, Mitch, that's still curious to me. And John and Mitch, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if I remember right, seeing pictures, were both of them in the flight position in the pictures? I can't remember. I saw an initial report. I'm going to have to go back and look. So help me out with that. All right. But still, John, Mitch, to have both of those fail within 1 second of each other, 2 seconds of each other. I mean, just think about it. Have them both fail, period. On takeoff during that critical phase of flight. You go, wait a minute, something's wrong here. All right. Yeah, Mitch, thank you for that. I did read that they had gone off and then gone back to whatever it is, run or flight or whatever. But the thing I would ask Mitch and John, did the switches actually move? Did the switches actually move? Because if it's a relay problem, then the relay would say they moved off, then back to run. Did the switches physically move? Because Mitch and John, I think, as you guys know, again, like I said, you have to pull them out from the flight or run position and put them in the off position. And that's just curious to me. And I haven't heard the cockpit voice recorder yet. And Mitch, John, maybe you guys have. I don't know. You guys are in the industry. Okay, John. Or Mitch, thank you. Data recorders and FADEC take signals from the switch position direct. Okay. Oh, John. Okay, that's a great comment, John. No, don't be sorry to disagree with me at all. And to all of you, you know, don't ever be sorry to disagree with me. I appreciate that, John. When you're flying, you trust your crew. During takeoff, I am looking at the instruments and monitoring. And if I see that in my peripheral vision, it would take me a second to dissect. Yeah, I'm sure it would. But still, I think if you saw somebody reaching for those switches, John, you would say something. Because during takeoff, a hand going down behind the throttles, wouldn't that be kind of out of the ordinary? And you kind of go, You know, I've flown with a co-pilot that I had to watch like a hawk. All right. Not a fun flight. And there's a couple of switch actions he made that I stopped him. All right. Anyway, the switches were turned off from left to right. 1 second, which is what I do when we land. Okay. The other pilot did after a few seconds, but in the moment, experiencing this is hard to process in the moment. Yeah. It's like reaction time, John. Like in the movie about Sullenberger and his first officer, you know, that reaction time, you know, you hit the geese and you kind of go, okay, what just happened to us? That's the human aspect of that, which in the movie, of course, they said, hey, you got to, you know, make it human. And I'm sure, you know, your mind kind of processes through that. Good discussion here, gents. Not to change the subject, but do you think China's 6th-gen fighter are anywhere near ours as far as its capabilities? Brett, let me come back to that, okay? Let me get back to talking about two things. I've already kind of talked about no competition for the tankers when I feel there should be an extremely close look at the current contract with the KC-46 and how it's going. And yeah, Brett, ping me in the chat, you know, toward the end, and let's talk about that. I think with the current past performance that we need to take a very close look at, do we buy more of these airplanes? You know, because it's been so problematic. You know, I've talked to a crew that flew them in the Gulf and they didn't have any problem. Thank heavens. Okay. All right, just to read this again. So if I was monitoring, I saw the pilot switch off the switches while I'm busy monitoring, it would take a second. Yeah. Why did you do that? 10 seconds after we did it. Yeah, exactly. And John, correct me if I'm wrong. That's the human part where your mind is processing, okay, what just happened? Because if those switches go to off, obviously engines quit running, all kinds of things are happening, particularly that low to the ground, you know, right after gear retraction and possibly flap retraction, maybe not. Yeah, human error, exactly, John. The 8JR fan, where did you get the sticker? Wallpilot.com. So the 8 Junior fan, I hope I'm saying that right. That's my side hustle. It's 4 foot long. I do 4, 6, and 8 feet, and I have 700 airplanes I've downloaded. There's 168 at Wallpilot, WALLPILOT.com that you can download that. That was my jet in Okinawa, Japan, 8874. Had my name on it. All right. So no, Brett, it's a recent issue for the KC-46. Or the one we're talking about is the Air India 787, where the engine switches went from run to off and then back on again, but the engine's conked out. Okay. John Castillo is a Southwest pilot. John, I'm assuming you're a captain at Southwest. Again, you know, John, I'll tell you something. We always forget about the human factor in a lot of this. And I remember flying in the T-37, the old Tweet. It was a human factor's nightmare And John, I'll tell you one story. And all of you, I want in the US, we have a leniency if we have personal issues. However, in India and other countries, they just want to meet their schedule. Yeah, exactly. John,